180-day deadline UAP report, UFOs flying over sensitive military installations, and off-world possibilities for unidentified craft in our skies and oceans. An exclusive interview with former U.S. government director of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, Mr. LUE Elizondo. Coming up. Mr. Elizondo, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us on Debriefed.
Cristina, it is my sincere pleasure for being here. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is a real thrill for me, and it is for several reasons. Not only because I'm a big fan of the debrief, but also on Twitter. A lot of people know I tend to haunt Twitter sometimes, and there are several of you that over the last several months I find very insightful. And so for me, having the opportunity to actually meet you in person for me is very exciting. And again, I also sincerely appreciate what you all are doing at the debrief. I think people probably, maybe some would be surprised, maybe some would not be, but there's a lot of people in Washington, D.C., you may or may not know this, that really rely on the debrief for interesting insight and inside information. And I don't know quite how you guys do it. I only suspect you guys have that all-star team on your side, but you guys are really managing to get the scoop on things, sometimes, if not hours, days before anybody else. So congratulations to that. And again, please keep up the good work, because it's making a difference, and people are actually are tuning in and listening and seeing what you guys have to say. So again, my hat's off to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll do our best to keep everyone informed and keep this topic in the spotlight. You've often stated that you are a facts-only person and prefer to talk about facts rather than give opinions. So what I'd like to ask you is if you can provide any factual insights into why the 180-day deadline UFO report is currently being speculated at being delayed beyond the deadline release date.
So Cristina, that's a great question. And first of all, let me reiterate what you said, that yes, I try to deal only in facts. So let's go over the facts very quickly and succinctly. Fact that the government established a UAP task force under the authorities of Deputy Secretary Norquist within the Department of Defense, and that the DNI owes a report from the time the COVID relief bill was signed within 180 days, which puts this in the June timeframe. And that report is due to Congress. That this is a report that asks for a best assessment within the U.S. government of the UAP issue. Those are facts. Now, let's do some slight speculation here based upon those facts, because I think you're right. I think, although opinions are interesting and maybe sometimes informative, they're not always necessarily based in fact. So I prefer to, in this case, whatever opinions I may have are going to be based in facts that we've collected. And so I think in order to do a good job, to do a comprehensive job, we need to have a comprehensive review within the United States government of all the documents and files and reporting that we currently have in our inventory. Now, when you look at the US government, this is a huge, huge endeavor, because I don't think people really understand the intelligence community alone is 18 separate organizations and agencies, right? 18. That's a lot of organizations and agencies. That's just in the intelligence community, not necessarily the Department of Defense as well. Okay, so you now have a requirement to look through 18 different agencies plus the Department of Defense to try to provide information of relevance to Congress. Now, to put that and juxtapose that into let's say something that in everyday terms people understand, it takes sometimes longer to remodel a kitchen than it does than this report is requiring government to act upon. So 180 days may seem like a long time, but it's really not. 180 days goes by really, really fast when you have to go through the entire U.S. government to get information in order to make a report to the U.S. government. Now, let's also superimpose that with the fact that not everybody in those agencies necessarily wants to have this conversation. Some people, are on holiday leave. Some people are on sick leave. Some people are just focused on other priorities. And so For someone to take the time and go through each and every agency comprehensively and thoroughly, that is a huge undertaking. I don't think people really appreciate just how hard that is. And then, by the way, you have to have the proper clearances and access to get into some of those subcompartments and organizations, some of their nuanced programs that they're not necessarily going to be wanting to share, right? So that takes time as well. And I think, when you look at this in the context of 180 days, I've said this before, I know it's a point of irritation for some people, but there's a difference between doing something right and doing something right now. And I really am a proponent of doing something right. It's not a stall tactic. I want this report to come out as much as anybody else because I know what I've seen. But I also know we have only one chance to do this right. And we've already waited for decades and decades. What's an extra 180 days? Well, it's not, especially if you were really wanting to make a worthwhile report. Let's put this into context of another example. The intelligence failures of 9/11, okay, during those awful events of September 11th in 2001. It took us almost 3 years to put a 9/11 commission report. And the 9/11 was a significant intelligence failure on behalf of our country, where elements within the government were not talking to other elements within the government who had a need to know. Well, this is kind of the same thing. Now, the consequences aren't the same, right? We don't have necessarily a tragic loss of life, but it is, once again, organizations within the government not necessarily talking with other organizations within the government. And frankly, this has been going on for a very long time. So to remedy that problem, I think it's going to take more than 180 days. In fact, as of now, I think we have probably just 3 months, maybe a little less. So that's not a whole lot of time. And I think we need to give people enough maneuver room in order to have the conversation with those who they need to have it with in other organizations, build that trust, build that rapport, and then maybe provide something comprehensive at that point to the US government. And I think it's going to take a little time, not a whole lot of time, but a little bit of time. And maybe the solution is to provide an interim report, right, to Congress in 180 days and say, look, here's what we know, here's what we don't know. And by the way, this is what we're going to do to answer those unknown questions for you, in the next 180 days, so to speak. And rather than make this just a one-off, maybe if this was up to me, this would be some sort of recurring requirement, right? Maybe every year the government should be answering to maybe some sort of best intelligence assessment, so to speak, like we do all the time with other foreign adversarial countries, right? We have these assessments that we put out periodically. Well, maybe we need to do the same thing with this enigma. As technology continues to improve and as our collection capabilities continue to improve and we begin to work a little bit better with each other, maybe there's a requirement for an annual report to go to Congress, right, on what is our current best understanding of this enigma.
The anticipation is definitely building. What, in your opinion, can we do as researchers and enthusiasts to help put pressure on our representatives to give this more prompt attention?
Cristina, you are doing exactly what you should be doing right now. This is the very best way to help this cause, is to have an elevated conversation amongst you and your peers of why this topic is so important. Look, my generation already has done a good enough job messing this whole thing up. We're in this mess because my generation screwed up and didn't decide to course correct in the past. And now I know, again, some people are going to jump on me and say, well, that doesn't include me, Lou. Well, maybe it does. But you know what? I'll put myself in that same category. It includes all of us who could have done something sooner about this topic. And by the way, I lay the blame on myself as well. So, there you have it. I think for your generation, if we're going to get to any type of real understanding of the nature of this phenomenon, this enigma, it's on your shoulders. And you're doing exactly what you need to do. Forget the stigma, to hell with the taboo, and start asking the hard questions and have the courage to do so. And not worry about what society labels you or anything else. Just have the conversation. And this is, at the end of the day, this is a scientific conversation. I think it's a conversation that involves all of humanity, not just one, ethnocentric group or geopolitical group than anybody else. This belongs to all of us, this topic. And so you having this conversation like this and asking the hard questions, this is precisely what you should be doing. And my hat's off to you. Thank you very much for doing it.
That's some great advice, and I appreciate it. Senator Rand Paul demonstrated the attitude that he felt ATIP was a waste of taxpayer money. Do you feel this is because he hasn't been properly briefed on the validity of the study of UAPs, or because he's being an echo chamber for general voters' sentiments to the topic?
Well, I can't answer on behalf of the senator. The senator is certainly entitled to his own position and his own opinion. However, in my experience, anybody who's received the classified briefings has come out and unanimously said that this is a very important topic and it certainly involves national security. So one can only speculate that maybe he wasn't briefed. But again, that's pure speculation. There's many reasons why people don't want to follow this topic. And I've seen it firsthand in some of my experience in the U.S. government. Some of it is it's due to as we mentioned, the stigma and the taboo. In other cases, it's due to people's philosophical and theological personal belief systems, that there's some sort of conflict or contradiction there. And frankly, they're uncomfortable addressing it. In other cases, it becomes a political football. Well, if my enemy is supporting this topic, then I'm automatically by default not going to support it. I don't care if it's a good cause or not. The bottom line is, if that person's for it, I'm against it. And that's unfortunately the political world we live in today. And that is the case in some cases. But I look at this from a historical perspective, and when you look at the courage that Senator Harry Reid basically had adopted and emboldened this topic by having the courage to establish this program. He did it with the help of other people. This was a nonpartisan issue. You had Senator Inouye, Senator Stevens, who was Republican, by the way, and former astronaut John Glenn. All of these individuals were true, by definition, American heroes. In some cases, gave an arm for their country. And I think we need to remember that. I think when you look at what's happening now, you have people from both sides of the aisle within the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. You also have former administration officials from different administrations, right? You have the former director of CIA, John Brennan, having this conversation quite openly of what this might be, this enigma. And then you have former DNI Ratcliffe, who also expressed his position and his opinion and concern on this topic. These are individuals that served under different administrations, and one conservative and one liberal. And I think we need to remember that this should not be a political conversation. This is one of the few conversations that involves all of us as humanity, and maybe this is a conversation that, frankly, might help mend some fences and bring people together instead of pushing them apart.
It's definitely been interesting to see how many politicians have been speaking out on this topic. Do you believe that a challenge the personnel involved in the UAP task force or research department for compiling the report are encountering is one of insufficient funding or lack of seriousness given to the topic, or actual defense intelligence significance obstacles that protect national security, or maybe all of the above?
Wow. Cristina, I would have to say all of the above and then some more. There's some other factors as well. Government is complex. We tend to oversimplify things. When we look at the government, we think of this huge, omnipotent organization that's there and kind of works sometimes, in the favor of the public and sometimes not so much. But in reality, government is comprised of people, just like you and me. And these people have interests, and they have hopes, and they have fears, and they have aspirations. They have goals. And in the government, a lot of people are looking for the next promotion. There's an old saying we have in the Army: what's the top thing on the mind of a one-star general? Getting his second star. So and this is kind of a human trait. People do not want to engage in a topic if it's going to be perceived as a liability to their career progression. And that's true in the business world, corporate world, and even academia, right? That's why a lot of scientists, even today, won't touch this topic, because even though they have privately come to me and said, Lou, this is one of the greatest scientific challenges we've ever faced, they don't want to have the conversation publicly because they're afraid of what their peers might think, right? And being ridiculed. And we've seen it before where people have actually have been fired from jobs because of their position on this topic. So I think the question is a great question, but I think it boils down to human psychology. I think there's various reasons why people don't want to have the conversation in certain levels of the government about this topic. Now, I will tell you that that's changing. People are having the conversation, and one can look at the headline news of any particular week over the last 3 years and see for themselves that conversation is now changing and evolving into something that's more palatable. And I think the reason is because people are now they're not receiving the same pushback as they did in previous years, and partly because of folks in your generation not only saying it's okay to look at this, but demanding it. Say, we want you to look at this. It's okay. You know, we're putting you in office. We're voting you in office, and we want you to look at this. And I think that's making a significant difference.
Yes, open-mindedness is so important for progress. Recently, the War Zone ran an article about naval ships encountering mysterious drones off the coast of California in 2019. This all sounds really intriguing in the context of this being a UAP encounter. However, the drone sightings came at a time when there was a lot going on. For example, the Navy snuck the U.S. Montgomery out to the 7th Fleet a month prior, and China tested 2 types of surface-to-ship missiles just days before the Navy ship encountered the mystery drones. With what we know right now, it sounds a lot like posturing between the U.S. and China. Is there anything that you're aware of that might suggest these sightings were UAP and not related to China using surveillance drones from a cargo ship in the region?
Christina, my personal opinion on this is based upon observations I've made during my career, and particularly in the area of advanced aerospace technologies, which I spent a little time on UAV technology earlier in my career as a young special agent. Older platforms such as a Hunter UAV and whatnot, but I spent quite a bit of time on the Pioneer, learning a lot about UAV technology, and a lot of that technology is still consistent today. You know, you have certain constraints whenever you're talking about a drone. You have payload and weight, you have thrust, and you have loiterability, the ability to stay on time, on target for a period of time. Now, let's just take the case of a commercial drone. And if anybody has spent any time in film industry, which we use drones a lot, one realizes that the actual airtime of a really high performance, you know, probably one of the best drones you can buy on the market, is about 15 minutes. Okay, and you can't really be a whole long distance away. You can't be very far from that drone if you want to continue to have control of that drone, right? It loses contact, and all of a sudden you no longer can control it. There are ways where drones can stay in air much longer, but those tend not to be the rotor type. Those tend to be what we call fixed wing, where they actually fly. They have to be going at a significant speed, have enough lift under the wings. And, you know, several hours you could technically be on what we would call on station. I won't go into a lot of detail on that, but when you look at the drones that were encountered by the USS Kidd and several other ships, first of all, it is my understanding they were called drones simply because they didn't want to say the word UAP. They didn't want to freak people out. In fact, they know that the deck logs are releasable under Freedom of Information Act. So I suspect that someone said, look, if you see any lights in the sky, you better write down the word drone. Do not write the word UAP, because that's going to get released and it's going to be a bad day for us in the press. So use the word drones. Secondly, when you look at these drones over the course of several days, right, there wasn't anything in close proximity where these things could have been launched and recovered. Drones are very expensive. And by the way, the more capable they are, the more difficult it is to just lose one in the water. They're very expensive, and the more capable, the more costly, and of course, you get in trouble if you lose one. So I think the flight characteristics of these drones were very unique. First of all, they hovered. We saw that. They also moved around very much like Dave Fravor explained in his Tic Tac, in a very erratic manner. They stayed there for, in some cases, hours upon hours over the course of several days, with no ship really close enough in proximity to control these things and recover them. We never saw them go back and recover them. It was poor weather conditions, which makes it even more increasingly tough to fly a drone. And let's not forget, we have technology aboard ships. I'm not going to go into detail. That can neutralize those type of technologies. Look, if I'm on a boat, when I lived near the Chesapeake, there was a rule: if you get near more than 300 feet, get closer than 300 feet from a ship, a warship, they could shoot you out of the water. And by the way, they were prepared to do it. So for these quote unquote drones to be literally flying over the flight deck of some of these ships for hours and hours and hours, and we're doing nothing about it, should be an indicator that we're not dealing with conventional drone technology. We're probably not dealing with drones at all. Now, again, I don't want to speculate. I think it's important that we let the eyewitnesses speak for themselves. But from my understanding, several individuals who were assigned to the kid have now come forward and said, yeah, you know what? Those weren't drones. Those are something that we have no idea. In fact, a lot of people on that ship are beginning to have a conversation in a little bit more public manner. So again, I want to be careful. I don't want to say anything that's going to put the U.S. Navy in any type of situation. At the end of the day, could it be Chinese technology? Yeah, it could be. But it just simply doesn't make sense that modus operandi for them to be doing that would be very, very provocative. It'd be very easy if it was a drone for us to just simply neutralize one and snatch it out of the sky and realize, oh, this is a Chinese drone, which would cause a lot of political friction, which China doesn't want right now. That's very provocative. And I think there's a very high probability it certainly wasn't the Chinese that was what was behind this incident.
Wow. If it wasn't the Chinese, it's definitely something to think about. Do you think it's safe to assume that most, if not all, of the security classified information on the topic in any special access program will probably not see the light of day anytime soon?
Christina, when it comes to classified information, I think people would probably, a lot of people would be disappointed when they realize that classified information really isn't any necessarily more sexy than any other information, so to speak. And I use that term loosely, but a lot of people envision, oh, it's classified and spooky, oh, cool, James Bond 007. When in reality, we classify information because of sources and methods, right? If we have a particular collection platform in an area that we don't want the enemy to know that we're there, then we're going to classify that information, even though it may not be any necessarily better or worse than any other information. So we don't classify information necessarily because we have a better video or a better photo. Now, I will tell you, we do have better videos and better photos, but that's not why those videos or photos are necessarily classified. They're classified because of the circumstances in which they were collected. Okay, and so I do think that classified information ultimately will see the light of day. All classified information eventually does. There's also very specific rules that, like, for example, when you classify information now, because in the past the government did abuse a little bit of the classification marking system, now there's a requirement what'll say declassify on. And it's usually that on that declassify online, you'll see a date. And sometimes it's 25 years to the date of that document was written. And those are the declassification markings on those documents. And then they become declassified. Or sometimes it'll be reviewed, OADR, right? So declassify, just declassify on the date that the originator decides to allow this information to be declassified. Now, some people say, well, but see, now it's a fox in the hen house situation. Well, not necessarily, because there's pressure on elements in the U.S. government to begin to to lower classification levels to the most efficient and consumable level possible. Every time you classify information, there's an associated cost. And people say, well, how could that be? Well, because you have to maintain that information digitally, or you have to maintain it hard copy. And there's people that are responsible for maintaining that information, reviewing that information, and whatnot. So there's an associated cost to that to the government, and it's not insignificant. So there is a motivation by the government writ large to try to release information as soon as they can. Of course, that's not always true. Sometimes, there are elements of the government that just don't want something coming out. But there is a review process for that. So I'm confident, I guess, a long-winded way to answer your question, and let me be succinct here now. I do think that information will see the light of day. Hopefully some of it will come out in the report to Congress at the unclassified level. But information is coming out every day on this topic. So this is, I know people are hungry for more, but I would challenge your audience just to go back in time for just 3 years. Just 3 years ago, if you asked anybody, what is your definition of disclosure? Most people would say it's someone high ranking in the US government saying that this is real. Well, guess what? We now have senators saying it. We have the former director of CIA saying it, and the former director of national intelligence. The highest level intelligence officials in the land have now said it for the record that they're real. Now, if we were to go back in time, I think most people would agree that, hey, yeah, this is part of disclosure. It's happened. But now, of course, we have short memories. 3 years later, we want more, right? We're hungry. Give me more, give me more, give me more. Which I understand. I'm not criticizing that. But what I guess my point would be, look how far we've come in 3 years. Again, as I said before, this is a process, not an event. We have accomplished so much together already. I think we should be hopeful about the future. I think the future looks very good. Again, I know some people right now in the Twitter sphere are saying, well, the report might be a nothing burger. I don't subscribe to that. I think it's going to be much more significant than just nothing to see here, folks. I think it's too late. I don't think we can put the toothpaste back in the tube at this point. But I also do want to temper expectations. If you're expecting a picture of a UFO sitting on the White House lawn, that's probably not going to happen. If you are expecting some sort of acknowledgement by elements within the US government that we've collected information on this, and it seems to be a very valid topic and possibly of a national security interest, then yeah, I think you're probably not going to be disappointed. Again, it's a bit of a long-winded explanation about classified information, but I do think that information will see the light of day. I'm pretty optimistic about that.
That would be amazing. I definitely think the public at large is ready for the truth. Do you believe there is a high likelihood that there will eventually be congressional hearings on the overall UAP topic? And if so, do you have hopes of them being public hearings?
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to put words in the mouth of Congress. Ultimately, Congress is going to do what Congress does because we, the people, demand it. Remember, they represent us, not the other way around. So if the people want a hearing in Congress, a public hearing, then chances are they'll probably respond to that. I'm not sure there's a need for it now because we don't have enough information. I think if it turns out that there was some malfeasance somewhere in the government, or there was a breakdown or a failure in the government to do its job or to report to Congress, which, by the way, we don't know yet, we don't know yet, then yeah, certainly you may have some congressional hearings and asking some very difficult questions to some people saying, how come, if you knew this was going along, if you knew this was going on, how come you didn't inform us? Or worse, this is your agency and organization and you're supposed to be in charge and you didn't know. Well, that's a problem too, right? There's a breakdown in the command and control of that organization. So yeah, I think there's going to be some hard questions, but I'm not sure it's necessarily going to be in a congressional hearing, an open hearing. Again, it's possible. I certainly don't want to put words in the mouth of Congress, but I'm not sure we're there yet. I'm not sure we're at the point where we need to get Congress energized prematurely. I think they are already doing a good job asking the hard questions. They've asked for this report. That's a great start. Let's see what the report says, and then maybe at that point, make a determination if maybe more action is required.
That makes perfect sense. Have you received any official or unofficial clues or hints at what the report may allude to or contain? What can you share with us, even generally speaking?
Oh, Christina, that's a great question. I can totally tell you're part of the debrief team for sure. That's a great question, and a question that I'm going to politely have to decline. I know exactly where you're going with this, and I applaud your efforts for sure. Spoken like a true journalist. But I whatever. Boy, how do I word this? Whatever capacity I may or may not be serving in. I think it's important that we give people who's in a position of responsibility and authority to have the latitude and the freedom right now to maneuver and try to answer the mail for Congress. And by me offering any insight, whether qualified or unqualified, I wouldn't want that to hurt any ongoing efforts that may be going on right now. I have to be very, very careful of that, very respectful of that. There's a lot of good people right now working this effort. Some directly, some indirectly. And I wouldn't want to do anything to hinder their efforts right now, because ultimately those efforts are satisfying our requirements, right? Our questions. So I will politely pass on that question.
It was totally worth a try, but I completely understand. In your opinion, how much of the research and maybe even monitoring of the UAP mystery has been outsourced to private and corporate entities?
I'll answer that one very succinctly. I think a significant amount, both historically and to some degree even presently.
Wow, that's huge and should be a topic for another show. Do you feel it's safe to assume that there is collaboration, even if somewhat limited, with other countries around the world in seeking answers to the UAP situation?
Yeah, I know for a fact, absolutely, and I think it's critically important. Again, this is a global issue, not a U.S. issue. This is an issue that involves all of humanity, not just one particular group of human beings or another. When you look at a map and you take away all the lines on the map and all the borders, you realize that we're really all rather connected. Americans are Americans, whether you're in North America, South America, Central America, whether you're in Canada or the United States. We all share the same neighborhood. We might live in individual houses, but we live in the same neighborhood. And I think it's silly that we would presume that any type of advanced technology would recognize nations' borders like we do. Unless they have a copy of Rand McNally map on board and they're looking, oh, we can't go over here because this is now Canadian airspace. We have to stay right here. That's silly. That's not the way it works. And so I think it's probably important that we continue to enjoin and engage our foreign friends. After all, we probably could use their help in this topic.
That makes a lot of sense. If an assessment is reached that the UAPs have an off-world origin, how do you think the government would approach making that information available to the public?
Wow. So Christina, forgive me for doing this, but I'm going to digress for just a moment because you said something very interesting, and I'm going to go down the rabbit hole here just for a moment because I think it's important. You asked if it's determined that they have an off-world origin, if these things have an off-world origin. I think a lot of times for us as human beings, it's an either or situation. It's either from here or it's from another planet or somewhere else. And I think a lot of times we're asking the wrong question. I think we tend to be, as human beings, we're binary creatures. And what do I mean by that? Well, some scientists have speculated that we are cardiosocial animals, meaning the first 9 months of every rough or plus or minus a month or two in everybody's life is spent in our mother's womb. And the only sound, the experience that we have of life is this rhythm of our mother's heartbeat, this on off. That's it. And because of that, some scientists speculate we look at everything in the universe as a binary question. And if you look how we behave, you ask somebody a question, even our questioning is usually binary. Is it hot? Are you hot or are you cold? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it black? Is it white? Is it up? Is it down? Is it north? Is it south? Right? But nature doesn't really work that way. Our brains work that way, but that's not really how Mother Nature works. Mother Nature works in zigzags and diagonals and straight lines. And so I guess my point being is that, we ask the question, is this something if it's not from here, it must be from outer space. Well, that's not necessarily so. There's a lot of other options that we need to consider. And, this is something that could be, as some people have proposed, interdimensional. Now, I don't mean interdimensional in a woo-woo sense. I mean interdimensional in a quantum physics sense. 99% of the universe we will never be able to perceive or interact with. 99%. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, because we sit right in the middle of the scale of the universe. You have this infinitely huge universe that's beyond our reach, and this infinitely small universe inside of us that we can't interact with. We're kind of stuck in the middle, and we're using 5 elementary senses to judge our environment: touch, taste, hear, smelling, seeing. And if we can't interact with the universe in those 5 rudimentary senses, then we'll never know it's there. And yet all around us, we know there's this reality that we'll never perceive. There's right now Wi-Fi signals, radio signals, GPS signals coursing through our bodies. But because we can't perceive them, we can't interact with them. We need a technological device to help us do that. When you look at the universe with the human eyes, you see a bunch of little sprinkly dots up in the sky, and you say, wow, how pretty. When you look at it through a radio telescope, microwave and infrared and ultraviolet, all of a sudden the whole universe lights up and you see things that you've never seen before. Okay. So my point being is that we tend to look at things in extreme, and we say, if it's not from here, if the congressional report says it's not from here and it's from outer space, now what? Well, what if it doesn't say that? What if it says that, these things are potentially something that is interdimensional, that can be explained through quantum physics? What if it says these things have always been here? In fact, they're more natural to Earth than we are. We're just now at the point where technologically we can interact with these things to some degree. But what if they're more natural to Earth than us humans, right? Maybe we're the aliens again. So I'm being speculative here and hyperbolic for a reason, but I want to encourage people to think beyond the terms of just either or. It's either from here or it's from outer space or off world, because that's not necessarily, that's one option, but there's other options there. And I think in order to even begin to answer that question, we need more data. We need much more data. And we need to make this a comprehensive conversation, including our best scientists, our best academics, even, yes, our best philosophers. This is a conversation that involves all of us, each and every one of us, not just the Department of Defense, not just the intelligence community. Yeah, from a national security perspective, they should be involved. But from the other perspectives, not so much. Maybe that's a question that doesn't even concern the US government, whether or not it's from off-world or not. Maybe is it a threat or not? And if it's not, then we're not going to worry about it. If it is, then we're going to worry about it. Doesn't matter the origin, doesn't matter where it's from. And so, again, I don't want to be hyperbolic here, but I think it's important that we go down just a little bit of that rabbit hole, because I'm not sure it's an either or a binary solution. Imagine how inefficient it would be if you, in order to get to work, you could only get to work by taking a series of left or right turns. You could never go straight, right? Take you a long time to get to work. So that binary way of thinking isn't necessarily, it's helpful for us as humans and probably the scientific reason is maybe because we are cardiosocial animals, but Mother Nature, she has a vote. She doesn't have to abide by our rules. And so maybe we just need to broaden our aperture a little bit about what these things could be.
Well, thank you for going down that rabbit hole. That's a lot of fascinating concepts. There are many documented and rumored cases of UAPs flying over sensitive military installations, and at times even interfering with electronics and mechanisms to do with national defense. Based on what you know so far, can you shed light on whether this has been seen by leadership to be aggressive in nature, probing in nature, or in fact a demonstration of technological superiority?
Christina, let's take the topic of UAP and set it aside for just a moment and say some foreign adversary has the technology to fly over our nuclear capabilities and interfere with them, whether it's nuclear propulsion, nuclear power, like our power grid, or nuclear weapons, right? In any scenario, that's a bad scenario. Anybody who has the ability to interfere with that without our ability to counter it is a problem. And that's why if I were to go to an active nuclear silo today, I would probably be met with some very angry individuals with machine guns pointing at me, and asking some very hard questions. That's just the nature of the beast. It's part of our crown jewels on how we protect this country, both as a nuclear deterrence and also strategic capabilities. So now let's go ahead and reintroduce the UAP topic and say that there's some sort of technology that's flying over our nuclear capabilities. There's not a damn thing we can do about it and can turn our nuclear capabilities offline at will. Is that a problem? Well, my response to you is yes, it's a very significant problem. If that is indeed the case, we need to figure out what's going on. And it appears that that may very well be the case. So if that is the case, and by the way, it's not just here, Russia's had some interesting events too. I won't go into a lot of detail. This is a global issue. This isn't just a US and Russia issue. This is a global issue. And I think, what is their intent? Are they trying to do quote unquote show of force? Are they trying to, be friendly, as some people have suggested, and warn us? Or is it some sort of reconnaissance and as you say, probing capability? Yeah, it could be any of the above, could be all the above. And that's, again, part of the problem. We don't know. There's a big information gap there. And yeah, it's fun to speculate. A lot of people will have a different opinion on this topic, but I think it's too early to tell. I think it's frankly dangerous for us to have any type of conclusive statement one way or the other until we have more information on this. Why is there an interest in our nuclear technology?
That's a question I'm sure is at the top of many people's minds right now. Do you believe there are, or are you aware of any endeavors to promote an official first contact scenario with the intelligence behind the UAPs that are being seen and monitored?
Well, first of all, is this first contact? Is the first question. We don't know. Maybe we've had contact. I live here in Wyoming, and the indigenous people here in the area, many have claimed have had contact for thousands of years with these things. So is it first contact? Are we planning? I don't know. I think, it's certainly something that we need to consider. But I think we also need to consider the alternative, and maybe that we've had close and continuing contact in various stages of our human development over a longer portion of history. Again, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, but I want to be careful that we don't, put ourselves into a little tight corner, and then we kind of paint ourselves into that corner. Yeah, there are organizations and people that are looking at this as, hey, are we getting to a point where we're reaching critical mass that we need to start considering a contingency where we realize we're not alone, right? Whatever that looks like. That's a conversation. The Rand Corporation had looked at this quite some time ago. There's been multiple studies on this. Is there one ongoing right now? Not that I'm necessarily aware of, but then again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's a providence of the government. I'm not sure I need the government necessarily speaking on my behalf. If there is contact with, let's say, another species, that might work good when we're engaging China or Russia or the Philippines or somebody else from a diplomatic perspective. But maybe this isn't the case. Maybe this isn't government's purview to do that. Some people have claimed that they've already made contact. I can't prove or disprove that. But if that's the case, then that would be indicative of the fact that whatever this is doesn't really give a hoot about our diplomatic status and who we decide to use as a mouthpiece to speak on our behalf. It's going to engage whoever and whatever it wants to engage with or without our permission. So again, I know I'm probably speaking a bit in hyperbole here, but I think we rely on the government too much. Being a product of the government, being one of those individuals from inside the government for a very long time. I think we tend to rely on them too much for a lot of things. We put too much responsibility on their shoulders when it's really we, the people, who should be answering that question. Honestly, I would tell you right now, Christina, I would 10 out of 10 times, I would put you up to be my representative to speak if there was another species from, let's say, outer space. I would rather have you representing me than some politician in Washington, D.C. 10 out of 10 times. So, there you go. Maybe D.C., maybe Washington isn't the right place to have people engaging this if whatever this is, should the time come. Maybe it should be people like you.
Hey, I'm all for being an ambassador to talk to the visitors. What is a good percentage to quote, in your opinion, of UAP activity that is being tracked beneath the oceans as compared to activity in the skies?
Yikes. I'm going to politely pass on that question because in order to answer that question, you have to be aware of what capabilities exist, and I probably shouldn't go near that question right now. That's a question that probably Congress has asked and will probably hopefully be provided with some report for them. But right now, I'll deflect that politely, and maybe next interview I'll be able to answer that a little bit more succinctly.
Okay, I totally understand that perspective. Again, I had to try. So, to disclosure, do you believe it is more likely we will discover microbial life on Mars or capture biomarkers in the atmospheres of exoplanets before a possible alien visitor disclosure is made public?
Well, I think we are already beginning to find biomarkers potentially. For example, methane and some of these carbon signatures that we tend to look for in some of these exoplanets beyond our solar system. Furthermore, there may already be evidence that there was microbial life found on Mars. Back in the 90s, during the Clinton administration, there was some speculation that we had already recovered some fossilized microbial life from Mars, and the jury is still out on that. So I think it's certainly possible, but I also think that we're finding equally compelling evidence right here on this planet that could lead us to the conclusion that we're not alone. For me, it's exciting because you have NASA looking for microbial life in our solar system. You have SETI looking for intelligent life using radio signals beyond our solar system and in our galaxy. And then you have other efforts right here, right now, looking and saying, hey, if the Earth has been here for 4.5 billion years, is it already here? You know, in fact, is Mother Earth a giant alien spaceship, right? Because some people have kind of subscribed to the notion of transpermia, which is that life maybe originated somewhere else in the cosmos and found its way here. And so, I think all options are exciting. I certainly wouldn't want to speculate one way or the other. Obviously, I have my own opinion based upon what I've seen in the evidence. But I'll let people draw their own conclusions to that.
So many variables. Yes, exciting times. So there's a whole new tech-savvy generation of young people going through high school and college who are getting exposed to the mystery of the UFO topic for the first time in recent months, given the uptick in the attention to the released naval footage and forthcoming Pentagon report, as well as TV shows such as Unidentified Inside America's UFO Investigation. With the new generation of young minds and enthusiasts and their curiosity in mind, what would you reply if asked if you could give just one fundamental reason for personal passion in pursuing the truth about the UAP topic? What would it be? What drives you onward?
Wow. Boy, I don't know if I need a cup of coffee or if I need like a bourbon to answer that question. Maybe I need both. Boy, Christina, a couple things. Look, the greatest accomplishment in my life is my two daughters. I have two daughters, and they are the reason why I live and breathe. Incredible human beings. And since they were little tiny babies, I always told them the truth. And then let them decide for themselves. I want my daughters to grow up in a world where they don't have to be fearful of their government, and they can trust those people who have been put into positions of responsibility and take their oath seriously, like I did and my colleagues. This is a topic that involves every single one of us. It does not belong into the providence of any type of organization, government, religion, institution. It belongs to all of us equally. And what drives me is the fact that your generation has an opportunity to fix the screw ups that my generation made. We did a lot of dumb things. We did a lot of selfish things. And as I've said before, this is a topic that's not like fine wine, where the longer we keep a cork on it, the better it gets. This is a conversation like rotten fruit in the refrigerator. It's starting to stink, and it's been in there a long time. And we have a choice. We can either clean out the fridge, or we can allow it to rot inside the fridge and eventually rot everything else. We have a sacred responsibility in the government to ensure the trust of the American people. Working for the government isn't a job, it's a calling. And it's something that is very profound for me and many others, and are willing to give our lives for that cause. And I think that this conversation has been squelched far too long. Too many good people have been ridiculed, lost their security clearances, lost their flight status, and much more because they saw something and they didn't know what it was. And I resent that. I resent that there is an organization out there or people out there who are willing to ruin the lives of other human beings simply because they don't want to have the conversation. That's more of a threat than any UFO flying over a nuclear site, because that's destruction from within. And I took an oath long ago to defend this country from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I've never been relieved of that oath. They didn't say when I retired, "Oh, no, you don't have to do that anymore." you're no longer held by that oath. I still am held by that oath, and I believe in that oath. And I think, I do this when I see young people like you that are fearlessly asking the questions, because my generation failed to. My generation was too, excuse my language, chicken shit to do it. And you guys are coming out and doing it. I still serve you. You're still my boss. The American people are still why I wake up in the morning and I do what I do. I haven't stopped serving my country. And to see finally my boss, i.e. you and other Americans, step up to the plate and say, no, we want to know more about this, and we don't care about the consequences. We want to know the truth. That to me is it's profound. It's amazing. And this is why I do it, because you are going to be the leaders of our country in the near future, for good, bad, or indifferent. It's you. You're going to inherit this country, and you've got to make it a better place, and hopefully learn from our mistakes. Don't do the same bonehead mistakes we did. Please, for the love of God, if we want the species to evolve, you don't have to behave like us gorillas. You can take this topic and give it the attention that it deserves. And maybe in your lifetime, maybe you'll have an answer, maybe not. But at least you don't have to be afraid asking the question, because in my generation, we couldn't even ask the question because it was so fraught with stigma and taboo. And yeah, I guess there you have it. Maybe that's why I do what I do.
Are you pleased with the way that more news coverage and information is getting out there about the UFO topic?
So first and foremost, allow me to congratulate the Debrief media for the incredible job it's doing. And I don't say that lightly. I can tell you, as a matter of fact, people inside DC who I know read the Debrief because of the access to information you all have seemingly before most anybody else, and your dedication to professionalism and the stories. Two, a hearty congratulations to you for what you're doing. You're obviously putting yourself out there and your reputation on a topic that is still considered to some degree, a bit kooky by some folks. And I mean, it is what it is. I mean, let's call a spade. And I think we're changing that conversation collectively, but it's still there. It's still prevalent. So thank you for that. I think if I had one word of advice for anybody listening, would be have the courage to continue to ask the hard questions. A wise man once said that the greatest nation is but one generation away from utter ruin. And it doesn't matter how much gold or natural resources or petroleum that a country has. At the end of the day, the wealth of a nation is measured by its citizens and the youth of that country, because the youth is going to inherit that country. And if they're not smart enough, they're going to squander all those resources anyway. So it doesn't really matter. So the greatest national treasure of any country has always been its youth, its next generation. And I think for me, it's frustrating that we put more emphasis on things like entertainment than we do on teaching, right? Most of the people in today's society are rewarded to be an entertainer of some sort, whether you play sports or you sing or you dance or you act, whatever. And again, nothing wrong with that, but our teachers and our nurses and our police officers and our firemen are the ones that are probably doing the most for our society and are the least recognized, and are the ones that are not rewarded for their sacrifice. And that tells me that as a society, our priorities may be a little bit misplaced. We prefer to watch reality shows of people bickering back and forth about stupid problems rather than solving some of the world's greatest mysteries, right? We encourage people to go and play sports, but we don't encourage our kids to be physicists and astronomers, that's a problem for me. You encourage people to go buy a pair of sneakers or tennis shoes because someone famous is endorsing them. What about the famous pencil that Albert Einstein held in his hand? Why aren't we encouraging people to put a line of pens or pencils, to encourage our physicists and our young minds out there that are doing exactly what you're doing and asking the hard questions. I know this has nothing to do with the topic, but I also think it has everything to do with the topic, because that's the only way we're going to really have answers. We have to be willing to reprioritize that what we think is important as a nation, and maybe recalibrate our thinking a little bit if we really want answers to this. And we have to be prepared and have the courage that those answers may not necessarily comport to our own narrative, our own preconceived notion of what life should be or how the universe should be, right? And that's not an easy thing to do. But I think with the help of people like you and your audience and the folks who read the debrief, I think we've got a pretty good chance. I think we've got a pretty good chance of doing that and achieving that together. So with that said, please allow me to thank you and your entire team, your production team. Again, excellent work. It's making a difference. You are changing the conversation. You are truly making history. So thank you so much.
Thank you, LUE ELIZONDO, for spending time with us today. It's been very eye-opening, and I look forward to talking to you again as things develop.
My pleasure, and anytime you want one, you just ask. We'll make it happen.
That's it for this episode of Debriefed, Dig Deeper, and Defense News. I'm Cristina Gomez, and you've been Debriefed.